The 9 to 5, it's the bedrock of modern life, the thing our parents told us to aim for, the golden ticket to a respectable, stable existence. You know the drill. You go to school, you get good grades, you go to more school, and then, if you're lucky, you land it. A real job, with a desk, and a computer that probably has a sticky keyboard from the last person who sat there. This is the promised land, the destination at the end of the long, winding road of education and unpaid internships. It's the adult version of getting a gold star, except this star comes with a bi-weekly direct deposit and a healthcare plan that you don't fully understand but are very glad to have. This entire system is built on a simple, alluring promise. Work a set number of hours and in return, you get stability. You get a predictable income that allows you to plan your life. You can get a mortgage for a house with a white picket fence, or at least an apartment with a temperamental landlord. You can buy a car that gets you from A to B. You can afford to go out for brunch on a Sunday and post slightly blurry photos of your avocado toast. This isn't just a job, it's a social contract, a rite of passage into adulthood. It's the structure that holds society together, or so we've been told, generation after generation. It's the path of least resistance, the default setting for a successful life. The appeal is undeniable, especially when you're young and staring into the terrifying void of post-graduation uncertainty. The 9 to 5 offers a prepackaged identity. Suddenly, you're not just a student anymore. You're a marketing associate, a junior analyst, a project coordinator. You have a title you can put on your LinkedIn profile. You have business cards that you'll hand out exactly twice. You have a reason to wake up in the morning, even if that reason is a series of back-to-back meetings that could have been emails. It's a powerful story, and we all buy into it because, frankly, the alternative seems chaotic and scary. It's the comfort of the known versus the terror of the unknown. And let's be honest, it feels good at first. That first paycheck hits your bank account and you feel like a king. You can finally stop eating instant noodles for every meal. You can buy that ridiculously expensive coffee without feeling a pang of guilt. The routine itself can be comforting. The morning commute, the familiar faces in the office, the shared complaining about the terrible coffee machine. It all creates a sense of belonging, a feeling that you are part of something bigger than yourself. You are a cog in the great machine of commerce. And for a while, that feels like enough. But what happens when the shine wears off? What happens when the routine starts to feel less like a comfort and more like a cage? The core of the 9 to 5 deal is a trade. A very simple, very fundamental trade. You give your employer a specific block of your time. The best, most productive hours of your day, 5 days a week. In exchange, they give you security. A steady paycheck, benefits, a pension plan if you're incredibly lucky and happen to time travel from 1975. This is the unspoken contract we all sign. We agree to show up, be present, and dedicate our mental and physical energy to a company's goals. We are essentially selling our time, our most finite and precious resource, for the promise of a life without constant financial anxiety. It's a deal that millions of people make every single day without a second thought. This trade has defined the lives of our parents and grandparents. For them, loyalty to a single company for 30 or 40 years was the ultimate career goal. You put in your time, you climbed the ladder slowly but surely, and you retired with a gold watch and a comfortable nest egg. This was the blueprint for a good life. It provided a clear path, a set of rules to follow for success. Don't rock the boat, do your job well, and the system will take care of you. This narrative is deeply ingrained in our culture. It's the reason why telling your family you're quitting your stable office job to find yourself is often met with looks of sheer panic and confusion. But here's the thing about that contract. The terms have changed, even if the expectations haven't. The security that was once the cornerstone of this deal has become increasingly fragile. The idea of staying with one company for your entire career is now almost laughable. Companies now demand more flexibility from their employees, while offering less stability in return. Layoffs have become a routine part of the business cycle. Pensions have been replaced by 401ks that place all the risk on the individual. The promise of security is still dangled in front of us, but it's a much flimsier version than the one our parents held on to. We are still expected to give up our time, but what we get in return is far less certain. So we find ourselves in a strange limbo. We are still following the old rules, but the game has fundamentally changed. We dutifully show up from 9 to 5 and often much later, tethered to our work by smartphones and laptops, long after we've left the office. We are trading more of our time, more of our energy, for a promise that feels increasingly hollow. We are upholding our end of the bargain, but is the other side? we are giving away our most valuable asset, our life's hours, for a sense of security that might just be an illusion. It forces us to ask a deeply uncomfortable question: is this trade still worth it? Let's take a moment to be brutally honest with ourselves. Look around your office or your home office or whatever space you inhabit between the hours of 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. Look at the tired faces, the slumped shoulders, the 1,000-yard stares fixed on glowing screens. Is this really the dream we were all chasing? The glorious pinnacle of professional achievement? Or does it feel more like a slow-motion trap? A comfortable, well-lit, air-conditioned trap, but a trap nonetheless. For a growing number of people, the daily grind is starting to feel less like a path to success and more like a recipe for burnout, anxiety, and a profound sense of emptiness. A life spent counting down the hours until Friday just doesn't feel like a life well lived. The signs are everywhere, even if we've been conditioned to ignore them. The Sunday scaries, that familiar wave of dread that washes over you as the weekend comes to a close. The constant feeling of being on, thanks to emails and notifications that follow you home. The physical toll of sitting in a chair for 8 hours a day, which doctors have cheerfully called the new smoking. The mental exhaustion of performing enthusiasm in endless meetings. These aren't just minor inconveniences, they are symptoms of a system that is fundamentally at odds with our well-being. We've been told that this is just what being an adult is, that this is normal. But is it? Or have we just normalized being miserable? The dark truth is that the 9-to-5 life, in its current form, is taking a significant toll. It promises stability but often delivers stress. It promises a career path but often leads to a dead end. It promises a work-life balance that, for many, is a complete myth. We sacrifice our health, our relationships, and our personal passions for a job that, in all likelihood, would replace us in a week if we were to disappear. We are told to find fulfillment in our work, but the structure of that work often makes genuine fulfillment impossible. We are cogs in a machine, and the machine doesn't care if we're happy. It only cares if we're productive. So it's time to pull back the curtain and look at the 9-to-5 for what it really is. Not as the unassailable gold standard of professional life, but as a century-old system designed for a world that no longer exists. A system that may have made sense in the age of factories and assembly lines, but feels increasingly outdated in the digital age. In this essay, we are going to dissect this institution. We will explore its origins, examine its hidden costs, and look at the emerging alternatives that could reshape our entire concept of work. It's time to ask the hard questions and consider whether we can build something better. Because we deserve more than just a paycheck. We deserve a life. Before we were all chained to our desks, desperately watching the clock tick towards 5 p.m., life was, to put it mildly, different. Imagine a world without schedules, without time cards, without the concept of business hours. For most of human history, this was reality. Work was dictated not by a manager with a clipboard, but by the sun, the seasons, and the immediate needs of survival. If you were a farmer, you worked from sunrise to sunset during the harvest, but your winters might be much slower. Your work was physically demanding, yes, but it was also varied and intrinsically linked to the natural world. There was no artificial separation between work and life. It was all just life. This pre-industrial rhythm of work was deeply woven into the fabric of communities. Artisans in their workshops, like blacksmiths or weavers, set their own pace. They worked until a job was done, not until a clock on the wall told them they were allowed to stop. Their productivity wasn't measured in hourly outputs, but in the quality and completion of their craft. There was a direct, tangible connection between their effort and the result. You made a chair, you sold the chair, you used the money to buy food. Simple. There was no middle manager asking you to fill out a synergy report or attend a mandatory team-building exercise. The horror. Of course, we shouldn't romanticize this era too much. Life was often brutal, short, and incredibly difficult. There was no job security, no paid sick leave, and certainly no dental plan. If the crops failed, you starved. If you got sick, you relied on folk remedies that were probably just a fun mix of herbs and wishful thinking. The point isn't that this was a perfect utopia. It's that the rigid hour-by-hour structure of modern work is a relatively new invention. For thousands of years, humanity organized its labor in a way that was more fluid, more task-oriented, and more in tune with the environment around them. The idea of selling your time in neat 8-hour chunks would have seemed completely alien. This all began to change with one simple, world-altering event, the Industrial Revolution. Suddenly, for the first time, large groups of people were needed to work together in one place, at one time, to operate machinery. Factories didn't care about the sunrise or the seasons. They cared about efficiency and output. And to make the machines run efficiently, the humans who operated them needed to be standardized. They needed to be controlled. They needed to be put on a schedule. This was the moment the stopwatch entered human history. And trust me, it wasn't here to make friends. It was here to start the clock on a whole new kind of misery. Welcome to the Industrial Revolution where, honestly, progress was measured in smokestacks and, human despair. In the factories of the 18th and 19th centuries, the workday wasn't 9 to 5. It wasn't even close. Factory owners, in their infinite wisdom and greed pushed their workers to the absolute limit. We're talking 10, 12, sometimes even 16 hours a day, 6 days a week. The conditions were appalling, the work was dangerous, and the pay was barely enough to keep you alive to show up the next day. The factory whistle didn't just signal the start of work, it signaled the beginning of a daily sentence of hard labor, often for men, women, and even very young children. This brutal system couldn't last. People are surprisingly resilient, but even they have a breaking point. A movement began to grow, a radical, dangerous idea that workers deserve to have a life outside the factory walls. Labor activists and unions started to organize, fighting for better conditions. They coalesced around a simple, powerful slogan: 8 hours for work, 8 hours for rest, 8 hours for what we will. Think about that for a second. The 8-hour day wasn't a gift from a benevolent boss. It was a hard-won victory fought for, and sometimes died for, by people who were tired of being treated like disposable parts in a giant smoke-belching machine. One of the first major advocates for this change was a Welsh utopian socialist named Robert Owen. Back in 1817, he started campaigning for an 8-hour day at his textile mills. He argued that giving workers more time for rest and recreation would actually make them more productive and improve society as a whole. Most other factory owners, of course, thought he was completely insane. They were making fortunes off the back of a 14-hour workday. And they weren't about to give that up just so their workers could, see their families or enjoy a bit of sunlight. The fight for a shorter workday would be a long, bitter struggle that spanned decades. Slowly but surely, the idea began to gain traction. Governments, fearing widespread social unrest, started to pass labor laws. The first was in 1847 in Great Britain, limiting the workday for women and children in textile factories to 10 hours. It was a small step, but it was a start. In the United States, the federal government eventually passed the Adamson Act in 1916, establishing an 8-hour day for railroad workers. This was a landmark moment. It officially recognized that workers had a right to a life beyond their labor. The 8-hour day was born not out of a desire for efficiency, but out of a fight for basic human dignity. So the 8-hour day existed, but it was far from standard. It took a titan of industry, a man who was equal parts genius and crank, to make it the norm. Enter Henry Ford. In 1914, Ford did something that sent shockwaves through the entire capitalist world. He not only cut the workday at his automobile factories from 9 hours to 8, but he also more than doubled the daily wage for his workers to a staggering $5. His competitors were horrified. The Wall Street Journal called his plan an economic crime. They were convinced he was either a secret socialist or had simply lost his mind. How could you pay people more to work less? It defied all business logic. But Ford wasn't a philanthropist. He was a ruthless pragmatist. He had a very specific, very clever reason for his seemingly generous move. First, the work on his assembly lines was mind-numbingly repetitive and exhausting. Worker turnover was incredibly high, close to 370%. He was spending a fortune constantly training new people. By offering a shorter day and a higher wage, he stabilized his workforce. People were suddenly lining up for a chance to work at a Ford plant. He solved his turnover problem overnight, which saved him enormous amounts of money and dramatically increased productivity. It was a cold, calculated business decision dressed up as a social revolution. But here's the second, even more brilliant part of his plan. Ford wasn't just building cars. He was building a market for his cars. He understood something fundamental. If you pay your workers enough money and give them enough free time, who do you think is going to buy your products? His own employees. By creating the 8-hour workday, he was also creating a new class of consumer with leisure time on their hands. What do you do with that leisure time? You go on a drive. In what? A Ford Model T, of course. He wasn't just selling a car, he was selling a new way of life. A weekend, a road trip, all made possible by his products. This is how the 9-to-5 workday, or in his case the 8-hour shift, truly went mainstream. Other companies, seeing Ford's staggering success and his ability to attract the best workers, were forced to follow suit. By the time the United States government passed the Fair Labor Standards Act in 1938, which officially mandated the 40-hour work week for a wide range of industries, it was simply formalizing a practice that Ford's big gamble had already made a business necessity. The 9-to-5 wasn't born from a desire for worker well-being. It was a byproduct of a strategy to reduce employee turnover and create a new generation of consumers. It was a business tool, plain and simple. The 40-hour 9-to-5 work week was designed for a world of factories and assembly lines. It was based on the physical limitations of manual labor and the economic logic of mass production. So here's the billion-dollar question: why are we still using it? The vast majority of us are no longer standing on an assembly line bolting widgets onto a chassis. We are knowledge workers, sitting in front of computers, trading in ideas, emails, and spreadsheets. Our work is not primarily physical, it's cognitive. Yet, we are still shackled to an industrial-era schedule that has absolutely no connection to the nature of the work we actually do. The shift from the factory floor to the office cubicle happened gradually throughout the mid-20th century. As corporations grew, they needed armies of managers, accountants, secretaries, and clerks to run the growing administrative side of the business. These white-collar workers adopted the same schedule as their blue-collar counterparts, not because it made sense, but because it was simply the way things were done. The 9-to-5 became a cultural institution, a symbol of respectable professional life. It was a rhythm that everyone understood, a shared structure that organized society, from school hours to television programming. It became the default setting for work, and nobody thought to question it. The problem is, cognitive work doesn't fit neatly into an 8-hour box. Creativity, problem-solving, and deep thinking don't happen on command between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. Some of your best ideas might come to you in the shower, or on a long walk, or at 10 o'clock at night. Yet, the 9-to-5 system demands presenteeism, the act of being physically present at your desk, regardless of whether you're actually being productive. It leads to a culture of looking busy. We stretch out tasks to fill the allotted time, we sit in pointless meetings, and we surf the internet while keeping one eye on our inbox, all to maintain the illusion of constant work for 8 straight hours. And so, here we are. We are living with a ghost. The ghost of the factory whistle still echoes through our modern offices, dictating our lives. We are using a system designed for 1920s manufacturing to manage 21st century digital work, and we wonder why we're all so stressed and burned out. The 9-to-5 is not a timeless law of nature. It is a historical artifact, a relic of a bygone era. It was a solution to a specific set of problems that no longer exist for most of us. Understanding its origins is the first step toward realizing that we don't have to be bound by it forever. It was created by people, and it can be uncreated by them too. Let's talk about your body. You know, that fleshy vehicle you use to haul your brain to the office every day? The 9-to-5 routine, with its endless hours of sitting, is waging a secret war on it. We've all heard the phrase sitting is the new smoking, and while it sounds like something a yoga instructor would say before charging you $40 for a class, there's a terrifying amount of truth to it. Think about your average day. You sit in a car or on a train to get to work. You sit at a desk for 8 hours, then you sit on the way home. Then you sit on the couch because you're just too exhausted to do anything else. Researchers aren't kidding. A 2017 study in the Annals of Internal Medicine found that prolonged sitting was linked to a higher risk of early death, regardless of how much you exercise. That's right, your 30-minute guilt run on the treadmill might not be enough to undo the damage. The problems start with the obvious. Your back hurts, your neck is stiff, your wrists are starting to feel a bit tingly, which is either carpal tunnel syndrome or the beginning of a very underwhelming superpower. But the damage goes much deeper than just aches and pains. When you sit for long periods, your metabolism slows down, your body becomes less sensitive to insulin, and your circulation gets sluggish. This trifecta of terribleness significantly increases your risk for a whole host of delightful conditions: heart disease, type 2 diabetes, and certain types of cancer. We've designed a work life that is fundamentally at odds with how our bodies are meant to move, and the bill for that design flaw is being paid by our long-term health. Our jobs are literally slowly killing us. And it's not just the sitting, it's the entire ecosystem of office life. The constant stress elevates cortisol levels, which can lead to weight gain, high blood pressure, and a weakened immune system. It's why you get a cold every time a big deadline is approaching. Then there's the diet. The break room donuts, the rushed lunches eaten at your desk, the vending machine that calls to you like a siren of sugary despair. A study from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention found that the average American gets about 1,300 calories a week from office snacks and meals alone. We are stress eating our way through the workday, fueled by cheap coffee and the quiet desperation of an ever-full inbox. We've accepted this physical decay as a normal part of having a career. We joke about our office bods and trade tips on the best ergonomic chairs as if we're just rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic. But this isn't normal, and it shouldn't be acceptable. The 9-to-5 structure forces us into a sedentary lifestyle that our bodies are simply not built for. It's a system that prioritizes perceived productivity over physical well-being. We are sacrificing our health for a paycheck, trading years of vitality for a steady job. It's a terrible bargain, and it's time we started looking at the fine print and realizing just how much it's costing us. Now, let's move from your aching back to your exhausted brain. The physical toll of the 9-to-5 is bad enough, but the psychological damage might be even worse. The modern workplace has become a perfect breeding ground for anxiety, depression, and a condition so common it now has its own official diagnosis: burnout. The World Health Organization defines burnout as a syndrome resulting from chronic workplace stress that has not been successfully managed. The key symptoms? Feelings of energy depletion or exhaustion, increased mental distance from one's job, or feelings of negativity about it, and reduced professional efficacy. Sound familiar? It probably sounds like half the people you know, and maybe even the person you see in the mirror. This isn't an accident. We have built a work culture that actively promotes burnout. It's called the cult of busy. We wear our exhaustion like a badge of honor. How are you? Oh, so busy, just slammed. It's a status symbol. If you're not overwhelmed, you must not be important. We are expected to be constantly connected, answering emails at 10 p.m. and checking Slack notifications on a Sunday. This always-on mentality blurs the lines between work and life until there are no lines left at all. Your home is no longer a sanctuary. It's just a remote branch of the office with better snacks and more comfortable pants. This relentless pressure creates a state of chronic, low-grade stress that slowly erodes our mental resilience. The structure of the 9-to-5 itself contributes heavily to this mental grind. The lack of autonomy is a huge factor. Being told where you have to be and for how long, regardless of your workload or energy levels, is disempowering. It can lead to a feeling of being a cog in a machine, which is profoundly demoralizing. A 2021 study by the American Psychological Association found that a lack of control over one's work life was a major predictor of poor mental health outcomes. We crave freedom and flexibility, yet our work lives are often built on rigidity and control. This fundamental conflict is a recipe for deep, lasting unhappiness. And so, we self-medicate. We rely on caffeine to get us through the morning, sugar to get through the afternoon, and alcohol or sleeping pills to switch off at night. We spend our weekends trying to recover from our weeks, only to be met with the Sunday scaries as the cycle prepares to begin anew. We are told to practice self-care, to do yoga, to meditate, to take a bubble bath. But you can't meditate your way out of a toxic work environment. You can't put a face mask on a broken system. The problem isn't our inability to cope. The problem is a work culture that is asking us to cope with the unbearable. The 9-to-5 doesn't just take a toll on your body and mind. It takes a toll on your life, your actual life, the one that's supposed to happen outside the office walls. By demanding the best, most energetic hours of our day, the traditional work schedule leaves us with only the scraps of time and energy for everything and everyone else. Think about it. You wake up, rush to get ready, commute, work for 8 or 9 hours, commute back, and by the time you walk through your front door, you're a depleted husk of a human being. Your entire evening is a frantic race to eat, do chores, and maybe watch an hour of television before you collapse into bed, just to do it all over again. This routine is devastating for our social connections. Making plans with friends on a weeknight becomes a monumental effort. Want to grab dinner on Wednesday? Sounds less like a fun invitation and more like a cruel and unusual punishment. We cancel plans because we're too tired. We lose touch with people we care about, not because we want to, but because the logistics of maintaining a friendship are too overwhelming. A study published in the Journal of Health and Social Behavior found a direct link between long work hours and social isolation. We are working ourselves into loneliness, trading community for a career, and the exchange is leaving us poorer in the ways that truly matter. It's not just friendships that suffer, it's our families. For parents, the 9-to-5 grind can feel like an impossible juggling act. You miss school plays, you're too tired to help with homework, and the time you do have with your kids is often rushed and stressful. You're physically present, but your mind is still back at the office, worrying about that unfinished report or that passive-aggressive email from your boss. For those without kids, the demands of the job can make it difficult to even think about starting a family or maintaining a healthy relationship with a partner. The job consumes so much of our identity and energy that there's little left to give to the people who are supposed to be the center of our lives. Perhaps the most tragic sacrifice is the loss of ourselves. What happened to your hobbies? The guitar gathering dust in the corner, the half-finished painting, the books you bought but never have the energy to read. The 9-to-5 leaves little room for the passions and interests that make us who we are. We become our job titles. Our identity becomes intertwined with our productivity. We forget how to be anything other than an employee. This slow erosion of self is one of the deepest, most insidious costs of the traditional work model. It doesn't just take our time, it takes our very sense of who we are, leaving a professional shell in the place of a vibrant, multifaceted person. Here is the central, mind-blowing irony of the entire 9-to-5 system. It's not even good for productivity. That's right. The whole structure, supposedly designed for maximum output and efficiency, is actually making us worse at our jobs. We cling to the idea that time in seat equals work done, but all the modern research on cognitive labor points in the exact opposite direction. Our brains are not machines. They can't perform high-level creative or analytical thinking for 8 consecutive hours. It's a biological impossibility. Forcing a knowledge worker to stay at their desk from 9 to 5 is like forcing a sprinter to run a marathon. You won't get a better performance, you'll just get an injury. Numerous studies have shown that the average office worker is only truly productive for about 3 hours a day. 3. Let that sink in. A Stanford University study found that productivity per hour declines sharply when a person works more than 50 hours a week. After 55 hours, productivity drops so much that putting in any more time is pointless. You're just spinning your wheels. The rest of that 8-hour day is filled with what scholars call performative work. It's looking busy. It's attending meetings that go nowhere, answering emails that don't matter, and staring blankly at a spreadsheet, all to give the impression of constant labor. The 9-to-5 model doesn't measure productivity, it measures endurance. This leads to a phenomenon known as Parkinson's law, the old adage that work expands so as to fill the time available for its completion. If you give someone 8 hours to do a task that really only takes 4, they will, consciously or not, stretch that task to fill the entire 8 hours. It's human nature. The 9-to-5 schedule actively encourages inefficiency. It incentivizes us to work slower, to take more breaks, disguised as work, and to put off important tasks. A system based on results rather than hours would encourage the opposite, working efficiently to finish your tasks and then using the remaining time for rest, learning, or other projects. So why do we cling to this broken model? It's about control and tradition. Managers, especially those from older generations, are often uncomfortable with what they can't see. They need to see their employees at their desks to feel like work is being done. It's a relic of the factory mindset, where presence equaled production. But in the knowledge economy, this is a fatal flaw. We are wasting our most valuable cognitive resources by forcing them into an outdated container. The hidden cost here isn't just our well-being, it's the quality and quantity of our best work. We could be more innovative, more creative, and more effective if we were just allowed to work in a way that aligns with how our brains actually function. Technology was supposed to be our savior. It promised to make our work easier, our days shorter, and our lives more efficient. In some ways, it delivered. The arrival of personal computers, the internet, and powerful software did, in fact, automate many of the tedious tasks that used to consume our days. We can now communicate with colleagues across the globe in an instant, access vast libraries of information with a few clicks, and perform complex calculations that would have once required a room full of people. This technological leap should have been the catalyst for a shorter work week. We could get more done in less time, freeing us up to, live our lives. But that's not quite how it played out, is it? Instead of shortening our workday, technology simply changed its location. The very tools that gave us the potential for freedom: laptops, smartphones, high-speed internet, morphed into a digital leash. The office was no longer a physical place we left at 5 p.m. It became a virtual space that followed us everywhere. Our pockets started buzzing with emails at the dinner table. Our laptops glowed in our bedrooms late into the night. The clear boundary between work and life, once enforced by the physical walls of the office, completely dissolved. We were freed from the cubicle, but in its place, we were tethered to a network that never sleeps, creating a culture of constant availability. This constant connection has had a profound and often negative impact on our psyches. The expectation to be always on means our brains never get a chance to truly disconnect and recharge. We exist in a state of perpetual low-grade anxiety, always waiting for the next notification, the next urgent request, the next fire to put out. This is not the futuristic work-life utopia we were promised. It is a new, more insidious form of the factory whistle, one that doesn't just call us to the assembly line in the morning, but whispers in our ear 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The efficiency gains from technology weren't passed on to the workers in the form of more free time. They were reinvested by companies to extract even more work. The digital leash represents a fundamental shift in the unwritten contract of work. The 9-to-5 model, for all its flaws, at least had a clear off switch. Now, the switch is gone. We are expected to manage our own boundaries, to push back against a culture that celebrates constant hustle. But this puts the burden of responsibility on the individual employee rather than on the system itself. We are handed tools of incredible power and potential freedom, but they are deployed within a framework that encourages their use for perpetual labor. Technology didn't break the 9-to-5, it just made it portable, creating a 24/7 workday without walls. For years, remote work was a niche perk, a privilege reserved for a lucky few in progressive tech companies or for freelancers who had opted out of the system entirely. Most managers were deeply suspicious of it. The prevailing attitude was, if I can't see you, how do I know you're working? It was a classic case of trusting presence over performance. The idea of an entire workforce operating from their living rooms seemed like a logistical nightmare, a fantasy that could never work at scale. The 9-to-5 in-office model was seen as the only serious, viable way to run a successful business. Tradition, inertia, and a fundamental lack of trust kept the office doors firmly open. Then, in early 2020, the world changed. The COVID-19 pandemic forced a global experiment that no company would have ever dared to run on its own. Almost overnight, millions of office workers were sent home with their laptops and told to figure it out. What followed was a chaotic, messy, and ultimately revolutionary period. People cobbled together home offices at their kitchen tables, juggled Zoom meetings with childcare, and learned a whole new etiquette of virtual collaboration. It was an accidental revolution, a forced leap into the future of work that would have otherwise taken decades to unfold. The impossible suddenly became the mandatory reality for a huge portion of the global workforce. And a funny thing happened. For many companies, it worked. The sky didn't fall, productivity didn't plummet. In fact, for many, it increased. A 2021 study from Stanford University on 16,000 workers over 9 months found that working from home increased productivity by 13%. Employees, freed from the soul-crushing commute and the distractions of an open-plan office, found they could focus more deeply on their tasks. They reclaimed hours of their day, which they could reinvest in their families, hobbies, or even just getting more sleep. The great remote work experiment, born of a crisis, started to look less like a temporary fix and more like a viable and in many ways superior way of working. This unexpected success story shattered decades of assumptions about the necessity of the physical office. It proved that trust, autonomy, and flexibility could lead to better results, not chaos. Of course, it wasn't a perfect utopia. The lines between work and home blurred even further for many, leading to a different kind of burnout. But it undeniably changed the conversation forever. The genie was out of the bottle. Employees had tasted a different way of life, one with more control over their time and environment. The landscape had shifted permanently, forcing every company and every worker to question the fundamental purpose of the office and the rigid 9-to-5 structure that had defined it for a century. While office workers were being sent home, another major shift in the work landscape was already well underway: the rise of the gig economy. Platforms like Uber, DoorDash, Upwork, and Fiverr promised a new kind of work, one completely untethered from the 9-to-5. Be your own boss, they said. Set your own hours. Work as much or as little as you want. For millions of people burned out by the rigidity and politics of the traditional office, This siren song of ultimate flexibility was incredibly appealing. It offered a way to escape the cubicle, to take control of one's career, and to build a life based on independent projects or gigs rather than a single employer. This model offered a level of autonomy that was unimaginable in a standard corporate job. If you're a morning person, you can work from 6 a.m. to 2 p.m. If you want to take a 3-hour break in the middle of the day to go for a run or pick up your kids from school, you can. The gig economy decouples work from a set time and place, focusing purely on the completion of a task or service. This appeals to a deep human desire for freedom and control over our own lives. It represents the ultimate rejection of the factory-era mindset, where workers are interchangeable cogs who must all perform their duties in unison. In the gig economy, you are, in theory, the master of your own destiny. However, this freedom comes at a significant price. The gig economy is a double-edged sword. While you gain flexibility, you lose security. Gig workers are typically classified as independent contractors, not employees. This means they receive none of the protections and benefits that come with a traditional job. No minimum wage, no overtime pay, no paid sick leave, no health insurance, no retirement contributions. You bear all the risk. If you get sick, you don't get paid. If work dries up, there's no safety net. The freedom to be your own boss is also the freedom to go broke. This has created a new precarious class of worker. Many people in the gig economy find themselves working longer hours for less pay than they would in a traditional job, constantly hustling for the next gig just to make ends meet. While some highly skilled freelancers can command high rates and build a stable career, many others are caught in a race to the bottom, competing with the global workforce willing to do the job for less. The gig economy therefore presents both a tantalizing glimpse of a more flexible future and a cautionary tale about what can happen when the social contract between companies and workers is completely dissolved. It's a wild west, full of opportunity and danger in equal measure. The combined impact of the digital leash, the remote work revolution, and the rise of the gig economy has culminated in a moment of collective reckoning. The pandemic didn't just change where we work, it changed how we think about work. Forced out of our routines and confronted with our own mortality, millions of people began to ask themselves some very deep and uncomfortable questions. Is this job really what I want to be doing with my one precious life? Does my work give me a sense of purpose? Or is it just a way to pay the bills? What am I sacrificing in terms of my health, my relationships, and my happiness for this career? This period of introspection has been dubbed the Great Resignation, or perhaps more accurately, the Great Reevaluation. This wasn't just about people quitting their jobs to go live in a van, though some definitely did that. It was a fundamental shift in the power dynamic between employers and employees. For the first time in a long time, workers felt emboldened to demand more. More flexibility, more autonomy, better pay, and a better work-life balance. They had seen that a different way of working was possible, and they weren't willing to go back to the old normal. A 2021 Microsoft survey found that 41% of the global workforce was considering leaving their employer within the next year. This wasn't just a fleeting trend, it was a seismic identity crisis playing out on a global scale. This re-evaluation is challenging the very core of the 9-to-5 life. People are no longer willing to silently accept the hidden costs, the burnout, the social sacrifice, the mental and physical toll. They are questioning the cult of busy and the idea that our jobs should be the central focus of our identities. The landscape is shifting from a company-centric model, where workers are expected to fit their lives around their jobs, to a more human-centric one, where workers expect their jobs to fit into their lives. This is a terrifying prospect for companies clinging to tradition, but it is an incredibly hopeful one for anyone who has ever felt trapped by the relentless grind. We are now standing at a critical juncture. The old model of work, the industrial era 9-to-5, has been exposed as a fragile and outdated relic. The pandemic broke the system, and now we are left to decide what to build in its place. Will we snap back to the old ways, drawn by the familiar comfort of tradition and control? Or will we seize this once-in-a-generation opportunity to completely rethink our relationship with work? The landscape has changed irrevocably. The questions have been asked, and there's no unasking them. The future of work is up for grabs, and the choices we make now will define the lives of the next generation of professionals. If the traditional 5-day, 40-hour work week is an outdated relic of the factory age, then what's the alternative? One of the most exciting and promising answers to that question is the 4-day work week. Now, before you start picturing a world of permanent 3-day weekends, It's important to understand what this really means. The most common model isn't about cramming 40 hours of work into 4 grueling 10-hour days. The truly revolutionary idea is what's known as the 180-100 model, 100% of the pay for 80% of the hours, in exchange for a commitment to maintaining 100% productivity. It's a radical proposition that challenges the very foundation of how we measure work, shifting the focus from time spent to results achieved. This isn't just a hypothetical fantasy dreamed up by overworked employees. It's being tested and implemented by real companies all over the world, and the results are frankly stunning. One of the largest trials to date, conducted in the UK in 2022 involving over 60 companies and nearly 3,000 employees, was an overwhelming success. At the end of the 6-month trial, an incredible 92% of the companies decided to continue with the 4-day week. They reported that revenue stayed broadly the same or even grew slightly, while employee turnover dropped by 57%. More importantly, workers reported significant improvements in their well-being, with 71% feeling less burned out and 39% feeling less stressed than before. So, how is this possible? How can companies achieve the same output in less time? The secret lies in a ruthless focus on efficiency. When you only have 4 days to get everything done, you are forced to eliminate the waste that clutters the traditional workweek. Those endless, pointless meetings, they get shorter or become emails. The culture of performative work, where you just try to look busy, it vanishes, replaced by a shared goal of getting the work done so everyone can enjoy their extra day off. The 4-day week acts as a catalyst, forcing companies and employees to reevaluate their processes, cut out the fluff, and focus only on what truly matters. It's a system that treats adults like adults, trusting them to manage their time effectively. The benefits extend far beyond the company's bottom line and the employee's mental health. That extra day off is a gift of time, the most valuable resource we have. People use it to start businesses, volunteer in their communities, spend more time with their families, or simply rest and recharge. This creates a healthier, more engaged, and more well-rounded society. The 4-day week isn't just a nice perk. It's a fundamental reimagining of the relationship between work, life, and productivity. It proves that working less can actually mean working better, and that a schedule designed for human well-being is also, it turns out, incredibly good for business. While the 4-day workweek is a powerful structural change, it's not the only path to a better work life. For many, the ultimate goal isn't necessarily fewer hours, but, more control over them. This is the core principle behind flexible work arrangements. It's the simple yet honestly revolutionary idea that employees should have a say in when and where they do their work, as long as the work gets done. This can take many forms. It might mean a core hours model, where everyone is expected to be online from, say, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. for collaborative tasks, but the rest of their hours can be completed whenever they are most productive, whether that's early in the morning or late at night. This approach acknowledges a simple biological truth. We are not all the same. The rigid 9-to-5 schedule is built for one specific type of person, an early bird with no other pressing life commitments. But what about the night owls whose brains don't fully switch on until the afternoon? What about the parents who need to do the school run in the middle of the day, or the caregiver who has to take a loved one to a doctor's appointment? A flexible schedule empowers these individuals to integrate their work into their life, rather than forcing them to constantly sacrifice their life for their work. It's a shift from a one-size-fits-all model to a system that, honestly, respects individual needs and rhythms. The benefits of this autonomy are enormous. Research from organizations like Gartner has consistently shown that when employees feel they have control over their schedules, their engagement, performance, and well-being all skyrocket. When you trust people to manage their own time, they repay that trust with increased loyalty and motivation. They are less likely to suffer from burnout because they can work during their peak energy periods and rest when they need to. This isn't about letting people slack off. It's about enabling them to do their best work by creating the conditions under which they thrive. It's a move away from the micromanagement of the factory floor towards a culture of trust and empowerment. Of course, implementing true flexibility requires a significant cultural shift. It means managers must learn to lead differently, focusing on outcomes and results rather than on monitoring keystrokes or checking who is online. It requires clear communication and a shared understanding of goals and expectations. But the payoff is a more resilient, diverse, and productive workforce. By letting go of the outdated notion that work can only happen in a specific 8-hour block, we open the door to a more humane and effective way of operating, one that attracts and retains top talent by offering the one perk that matters most: control over one's own life. As companies grapple with the post-pandemic reality, many have landed on what they see as a happy medium, the hybrid model. This approach attempts to combine the benefits of remote work with the advantages of in-person collaboration. Typically, it involves employees working from home for a few days a week and coming into the office on the other days. On the surface, it seems like the perfect compromise. You get the flexibility and focus of remote work, plus the social connection, spontaneous creativity, and team building that can happen when everyone is in the same room. It's an attempt to have your cake and eat it too, keeping both the accountants and the employees happy. The appeal of the hybrid model is understandable. It acknowledges that the office still has a purpose, even if that purpose has changed. The office is no longer the place where you must go to do your individual focused work. That can often be done better at home. Instead, the office is being reimagined as a social hub, a place for intentional collaboration. Teams might come in on the same days to have their big brainstorming sessions, client meetings, or company-wide events. This structure allows companies to maintain a sense of culture and connection while still offering the flexibility that employees now demand. It's a pragmatic solution for organizations that aren't quite ready to let go of a physical headquarters entirely. However, the hybrid model is not without its own set of complex challenges. If not managed carefully, it can create a two-tiered system. There's a risk that the employees who come into the office more frequently will get more face time with managers, leading to proximity bias, where they are unfairly favored for promotions and opportunities over their remote-first colleagues. It also requires a serious investment in technology and processes to ensure that meetings are inclusive for everyone, regardless of their location. A poorly run hybrid meeting, where remote attendees are just tiny faces on a screen who can't hear the conversation, can be even more frustrating and isolating than being fully remote. Ultimately, for the hybrid model to be more than just a messy halfway solution, it requires intentionality. Companies must be extremely clear about why they want people in the office. Is it for specific tasks, for team cohesion, or is it just to satisfy a manager's need for control? The most successful hybrid models treat the office as a tool to be used for a specific purpose, not as a default location. They give employees and teams the autonomy to decide how and when to use that tool. Without that clarity and trust, the hybrid model risks becoming the worst of both worlds: the distractions of the office combined with the logistical headaches of remote work. While changing the when and where of work through 4-day weeks, flexible hours, and hybrid models is a massive step forward, it's still only part of the solution. The most profound and lasting change we can make is to rethink the why of our work. The Great Reevaluation wasn't just about people wanting a better schedule. It was about people wanting a better life, one where their work has meaning and purpose. A shorter or more flexible work week is wonderful, but if you're still spending those hours doing a soul-crushing job that you hate, it's just a prettier cage. The real revolution is about building a work culture that values human contribution beyond mere productivity metrics. This deeper shift involves fostering environments where employees feel psychologically safe, where their ideas are valued, and where they can see a clear connection between their daily tasks and a larger mission they believe in. It means prioritizing outcomes over optics, trusting employees to do their jobs without constant surveillance. It means investing in their growth and development, not just as workers, but as human beings. A company that provides a good salary and a 4-day week is great. A company that also gives its employees a sense of belonging, autonomy, and purpose is, honestly, unstoppable. This is what the modern workforce is truly craving. This might sound soft and idealistic, but it has hard, tangible business benefits. Companies that lead with purpose and trust consistently outperform their peers. They attract the best talent, have lower rates of burnout and turnover, and are more innovative and resilient in the face of challenges. According to a 2020 study by Deloitte, purpose-driven companies report 30% higher levels of innovation and 40% higher levels of workforce retention. When people feel that their work matters, they are more engaged, more creative, and more willing to go the extra mile, not because they are forced to, but because they want to. Purpose is the ultimate productivity hack. So, is there a better way? The answer is a resounding yes, but it's not a single, one-size-fits-all solution. The better way is a mosaic of different approaches. Shorter work weeks, flexible schedules, thoughtful hybrid models, all built on a foundation of trust, autonomy, and a shared sense of purpose. It requires us to abandon the industrial-era mindset of control and presenteeism and embrace a more human-centric vision of work. It's about treating employees not as resources to be extracted, but as partners in a common goal. This is the future of work, and it's a future that is not only more productive, but also, honestly, infinitely more humane. So here we are at the end of our journey through the strange and often brutal history of the 9-to-5. We've seen its origins on the smoke-choked factory floors of the Industrial Revolution, a hard-won victory that was later co-opted by savvy capitalists like Henry Ford to sell more cars. We've dissected the heavy price we pay for this rigid structure, the toll on our bodies, the erosion of our mental health, the slow sacrifice of our social lives and personal passions. We've stared into the cold, hard face of the productivity paradox, the ridiculous reality that this system, designed for efficiency, actually makes us worse at our jobs. The evidence is in, the case is closed, and the verdict is undeniable. The 9-to-5 is broken. It is a relic, a ghost from a past that no longer exists. Let's be perfectly clear. Acknowledging this isn't an attack on the concept of hard work or the need to earn a living. It's an attack on a specific, outdated, and frankly harmful way of organizing that work. For a century, we have been trying to fit our modern, creative, cognitive lives into a container built for manual labor on an assembly line. It's like trying to run the latest smartphone on a steam engine. The result is inefficiency, frustration, and a whole lot of wasted potential. We have been conditioned to accept this system as the unchangeable default setting for professional life, but it's time to call it what it is: a collective historical mistake that we have the power to correct. The first and most crucial step in moving forward is to simply accept this truth. We must collectively stop pretending that this is the best we can do. We have to shed the cultural baggage that tells us that time in a chair is a measure of value, or that exhaustion is a badge of honor. We need to look at the mounting data on burnout, the rising rates of anxiety, and the quiet desperation in so many workplaces, and connect the dots. These are not individual failings, they are systemic failures. They are the predictable outcomes of a system that prioritizes control over trust, presence over performance, and profit over people. The era of the 9-to-5 as the unquestioned gold standard is over. This realization can be both terrifying and liberating. It's scary because it means the well-trodden path our parents followed is no longer a reliable map to success or stability. But it's liberating because it means we are free to draw a new map. We are the generation that gets to question everything. We have the data, the technology, and a once-in-a-lifetime global disruption that has forced a conversation that was long overdue. The foundation of the old world of work has cracked, and through those cracks, we can see the possibility of something new, something better, something that is actually designed for the way we live and work today. As young professionals entering or navigating the early stages of our careers, we are standing at a historic crossroads. Behind us lies the crumbling monument of 20th century office life, a path defined by conformity, sacrifice, and a clear, if uninspiring, set of rules. Ahead of us lies a landscape that is still being formed, an uncharted territory of flexible schedules, remote work, 4-day weeks, and purpose-driven careers. The choice of which path to take is, for the first time in generations, truly up for grabs. We are not just participants in the future of work, we are its architects, its pioneers, and its most important stakeholders. This is both a massive responsibility and an incredible opportunity. The temptation to cling to the old ways will be strong. There is a certain comfort in the familiar, even when the familiar is making us miserable. Companies will try to lure us back to the old normal with the promise of free snacks and a renewed sense of office culture. Managers who are uncomfortable with change will push for a return to the systems that give them a sense of control. We will be told that our demands for flexibility are unrealistic, that our desire for work-life balance is a sign of entitlement. It will take courage to resist this gravitational pull of the past and to insist on a future that serves our well-being as much as it serves a company's bottom line. This is not just about our individual happiness. It's about shaping the very fabric of our society for decades to come. The choices we make now, the jobs we take, the companies we support, the work cultures we demand, will set the precedent for the future. Every time a talented individual turns down a job offer from a rigid, old-fashioned company in favor of one that offers trust and flexibility, it sends a powerful message. Every time we push back against the always-on culture or advocate for a 4-day week, we are casting a vote for a more humane way of life. We have more power than we think, especially in a tight labor market where our skills are in high demand. The choice, therefore, is not merely between working from home or working in an office. It is a much deeper choice about our values. Do we value control, or do we value trust? Do we value presence, or do we value performance? Do we value endless growth for its own sake, or do we value sustainable well-being for everyone? This is the crossroads we stand at. The previous generation built a world of work around the needs of the industrial machine. Our generation has the chance to build a world of work around the needs of the human being. It is our turn to decide what the next century of work will look like, and the decisions we make will echo for years. So, how do we actually do it? How do we move from criticizing the old system to building the new one? It can feel like a daunting, overwhelming task, like trying to dismantle a skyscraper with a toothpick. But the revolution doesn't happen overnight. It happens incrementally, in the small choices we make every single day. It starts with you, in your own career. When you are interviewing for a job, you are also interviewing the company. Don't be afraid to ask the hard questions. What are their policies on flexible hours? How do they measure productivity? How do they support employee well-being and prevent burnout? Their answers will tell you everything you need to know about whether they are a company of the past or a company of the future. Once you are inside an organization, you can become an agent of change from within. You don't have to be a CEO to make a difference. You can start by modeling healthy work habits, leave work on time, don't send emails at 10 p.m. Take your full lunch break away from your desk. These small acts of rebellion against the cult of busy can have a ripple effect, giving your colleagues permission to do the same. You can advocate for more efficient processes. Suggest that a recurring hour-long meeting could be replaced with a 15-minute stand-up or a shared document. Champion the tools and technologies that enable smarter, more flexible work rather than just more work. For those with the entrepreneurial spirit, the opportunity is even greater. You can build the kind of company you always wished you worked for. You can create a business from the ground up that has a 4-day week, a remote-first culture, and a genuine commitment to purpose baked into its DNA. These new progressive companies are not just successful businesses, they are proof of concept. They are living, breathing examples that a better way is possible, and their success puts pressure on the larger, more traditional corporations to adapt or risk becoming obsolete. Every new startup that prioritizes people over outdated processes is another brick in the foundation of the new world of work. Ultimately, building the future is a collective project. It requires us to talk to each other, to share our experiences, and to support one another. It means joining professional communities, sharing data on what works, and celebrating the companies that are getting it right. It means having open and honest conversations with our managers and leaders about what we need to thrive. It's a slow and sometimes frustrating process, but every conversation, every policy change, and every small personal boundary is a step in the right direction. The future of work isn't a distant, abstract concept. It's something we are actively constructing, one job, one team, and one company at a time. For generations, the golden ticket was a stable 9-to-5 job. It was the prize at the end of the educational marathon, the key that unlocked a respectable adult life with a steady paycheck and a mortgage. We were taught to chase this ticket, to sacrifice for it, and to organize our entire existence around it. But as we've seen, the shine has worn off that golden ticket. For many, it has started to look less like a prize and more like a beautifully gilded cage, one that provides security at the cost of our health, our time, and our very sense of self. It promises us the means to a good life, but it often robs us of the time and energy to actually live it. It's time for a new definition of success. It's time to seek a new kind of golden ticket. The real prize isn't just a job that allows you to make a living, it's a life that is worth living. This new ideal isn't about rejecting ambition or hard work. It's about integrating our work into a richer, more balanced, and more meaningful existence. It's the freedom to pursue a passion project on your day off. It's the energy to be truly present with your friends and family. It's the mental space to be creative, to learn, to grow, and to contribute to your community. It's a life where your job is a part of who you are, not the entirety of it. This shift requires a profound change in our personal and collective mindset. We must stop measuring our worth by our job titles or the hours we log. We must start measuring it by the quality of our relationships, the depth of our experiences, and the positive impact we have on the world around us. This is the ultimate goal of reimagining work. The point of a 4-day week isn't just to have a longer weekend, it's to have a fuller life. The point of remote work isn't just to wear sweatpants all day. It's to have more autonomy and a deeper connection to our homes and communities. These are tools to help us achieve a much larger and more important goal. The dark truth about the 9-to-5 is that it promised a dream, but often delivered a nightmare of quiet compromises. It asked for our time and, in return, gave us a paycheck, but quietly stole our vitality. The hopeful truth is that we now know better, and because we know better, we can demand better. We can build careers, companies, and a culture that honor our humanity. We can create a future where our work supports our life, not consumes it. This is the real golden ticket for the 21st century. Not just a job, not just security, but a full, vibrant, and well-lived life. And it's a future that is entirely within our reach.